Just like moving on to your current work, like are you using AI or are you seeing AI getting used in the finance world?
I'm reading about it more than I'm seeing it. I was thinking about, when I started my career, we used to go to the firm I worked at on Wall Street, and I think we were all the big Wall Street firms were the same. There was nothing specific about what I'm describing. It was general. You went to the corporate finance library and you said, I'd like to have the 10K, the annual report for, I don't know if Microsoft was publicly traded back then, but I'd like to have the 10K for IBM, General Motors, right? And typically you'd request a lot of documents. Then you'd come back like an hour later and you'd have like a stack of documents, a foot high. And then you'd sit at your cubicle and you'd turn the pages and you'd find what you were looking for. And then you'd enter it into, actually we had Lotus 123. That was the original, market leader in spreadsheets.
Is AI transforming industries faster than markets and education can keep up? Today I'm joined by Ed Harris, founder of Harris Northwest Advisors, to talk venture capital, the future of learning, and AI's impact on today's financial landscape. Let's dive in.
Hey Ed, how's it going?
I'm good, Apurva. How are you?
I'm good. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ed Harris. I am the founder of an investment banking firm called Harris Northwest Advisors. And we do two things. One is we work with privately held companies when they're looking to get acquired. And then we also have a platform called Harris Alpha, and that connects startups with accredited investors. I started my career on Wall Street, so I worked at one of the large investment banking firms. It was the biggest firm of its day back in the 1980s called Salomon Brothers. So early on, I was working on transactions with Fortune 500 level companies. And this is kind of the old economy. So back then, the only real big tech, company that did business on Wall Street was IBM. That was kind of like the tech sector. And maybe, a few other, a couple others. Then I moved to Seattle early in my career, and I've been in and around tech for quite a bit of time. And about 5 years ago, I went back to sort of where I started and got back into M&A. And then this new venture, Harris Alpha, which is relatively recent, kind of also ties me back a little bit to the tech community. I've always been on the business side of things, so I'm not an engineer. I've never written a line of code. I don't really know how anything works, in terms of like a true, scientific, technical, or engineering standpoint. I'm basically a consumer of technology, and on the business and financial side, somebody who analyzes the operating and financial performance of companies. So I've always been on that, even though I've been in tech quite a bit, it's always been on the business side of things.
And when I was going through your background, I also noticed that you have an interest in education. You were a chairman.
So for a relatively good stretch of the middle of my career, for about a 15, 20-year stretch, I'm kind of dating myself, obviously. If a 15 to 20-year stretch is the middle of my career, I'm kind of, it's a long career. But for a stretch of time, I was involved in for-profit education models and education technology. I co-founded an online high school, which we sold to a large corporate strategic. I was on the boards of a couple of other tech companies that got acquired. So again, I've always been on kind of the deal side, raise money, try to get to liquidity. I've spent a fair bit of time in that education world.
And what do you think about AI for education, or like how AI is affecting education?
Yeah, so I would say the challenge in education, if you take a look at what is not working as well as it could in education and what could be improved, it doesn't take very long to come up with lots and lots of things that are suboptimal. I mean, there are just many things about the world of education, the world of schools, the learning experience for students, and so on. There are lots and lots of things that are relatively easy to identify. The challenge is hacking your way through the bureaucracy, and that's always been the difficulty. There's a lot of innovation happening in education, but one of the challenges for getting scale and real breakthroughs is the almost what I would call the ossification of the model. Most people in the United States, I'm going to speak specifically about the United States. I'm less familiar with education markets in other countries. But specifically as regards the United States, the majority of students go to public school. I think around 85 to 90% of kids in America attend taxpayer-funded public schools. And those institutions are kind of locked into very rigid operating models that they're not necessarily opposed to change. They only like change if it aligns with the operational model. And, the funny thing is, so I went to high school a very long time ago, and high school today looks exactly like high school when I went to high school. And you have to start early in the morning and end early in the afternoon for the sports teams. Like, you can't have a sports program unless your school day ends early enough so that, the kids that participate in sports. The only difference is now there's girls' sports. When I was in high school, it was a much more, I would say, primitive era. The boys played sports and the girls, waved the pom-poms on the sidelines. Now the girls get the same opportunity to participate in sports, but the school day hasn't changed. It's still, you got to start real early in the morning because you can't have sports practice, unless the school day ends early enough, and the day is still broken up into whatever the particulars of one school are, roughly 55-minute units of time. Is that an optimal way to learn? Is it really productive to have kids, get up? Typical American high school has maybe 1,200 kids. Every 55 minutes, a bell rings, 1,200 kids get up, change classrooms. Is that really an optimal way to run a school day? I can't, no. The short answer is no. Can you change it? Well, good luck. I should say, by the way, my late wife was European. And in her home country, which is the Netherlands, which is pretty common to a lot of the other European countries, sports is completely separate from secondary education. So if you're good at sports, if at 12, 13 years old, you are identifying as somebody who's serious at sports, you do your sports with a club. School is school, and those countries are just as enthusiastic about sports as we are. There's nothing innately American about enthusiasm for sports. It's just that the school doesn't have to worry about, practice is at, 3:00 in the afternoon and, we got to make sure the school day ends by then. No, let's say the 10 or 15 or 20% of kids that are super enthusiastic about sports and want to be on a team, they do it outside of school. Just a different way to run things. Not that necessarily that they have better educational outcomes, but the United States is trapped in a model. Anyway, that's a lot. That maybe was more of longer answer than you were hoping for.
No, it completely makes sense. There is a need for it to change. Like, I was brought up in India. Like, I was in classrooms with 59 other students. The classrooms were 60 students and one teacher. Obviously you weren't getting any specialized education for your needs. So if the teacher is doing a question, if the student understands, that's good. If someone doesn't understand, they're just left behind. So yeah, there's a need for that for sure. And I think AI could help there, but what's happening right now is students are using AI to do their homework, and it's you using a robot to lift weights in the gym. You're losing the part where you're actually going through the learning process. So yeah, I do agree with there's a need for change there, and there's a lot of bureaucracy around making that change happen in education. Let's get how.
By the way, I didn't answer your question about AI. So I think AI has tremendous promise. Again, the problem is the implementation is going to depend on the schools being open to adopting new methods of teaching, new methods of learning. So I agree with the basic premise. There's a tremendous amount of potential, but you keep on running into the bureaucracy of how do you implement change in an institution that's generally, again, from an operational standpoint, resistant to change. But yeah, I think there's tremendous potential there for sure.
Have you heard about alpha schools?
No, I don't know what those are.
So I listened to a podcast about it. So they started this school, it's in the US, it's called Alpha School. And it's basically they're using AI. So students have to just spend 2 hours actually doing the coursework, and all the rest of the time they're actually doing group activities. So they're learning leadership skills, they're learning how to do co-curricular activities. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Very promising. I think the challenge with all of those experimental models, or maybe not experimental, but innovative is probably the better term. The challenge with a lot of those innovative models is if they're private, it's hard to scale because only a very small minority of the population can afford to pay private school tuition. So there's a lot there, you tend to see more innovation on the private school, within private schools, because they're attracting like-minded people, and either somebody's subsidizing that cost or the parents are paying for it, or some combination of both. So yeah, I think you'll see more innovation within private education.
Just like moving on to your current work, like, are you using AI, or are you seeing AI getting used in the finance world?
I'm reading about it more than I'm seeing it. I was thinking about, when I started my career, we used to go to the firm I worked at on Wall Street, and I think we were all the big Wall Street firms were the same. There was nothing specific about what I'm describing. It was general. You went to the corporate finance library, and you said, "I'd like to have the 10K, the annual report for." I don't know if Microsoft was publicly traded back then, but I'd like to have the 10K for IBM, General Motors, right? And you'd request a lot of documents. Then you'd come back like an hour later, and you'd have like a stack of documents, a foot high, and then you'd sit at your cubicle and you'd turn the pages and you'd find what you were looking for. And then you'd enter it into, actually we had Lotus 123. That was the original, market leader in spreadsheets. And now you can do that, obviously, even before AI. Now you can do that much more seamlessly. You download reports online. Everything's a lot, more, there's less friction involved in the gathering of information. So I would say for right now, I haven't really seen AI, change the way that people are doing this kind of business, but I have definitely seen people and read about, and I'm sure you have too, people talking about what's on the horizon, what's next. So I think, there's a lot of potential for innovation. I'm not sure if it's get any easier to predict winners. One of the funny things about business is it only becomes obvious afterwards, like, oh yeah, of course that was going to be successful. Of course Starbucks was going to become a big company. Or of course Airbnb was going to become a big company. But people only have that, of course, like after it happens. And so, that would be something that would be interesting, is if AI can become a better predictor of success. Because a lot of times it seems, the companies that really break through and create new markets and new ways of doing business. I'm thinking about like an Uber, for example, where it's, it takes a model and, basically changes the way that people, engage in commerce or their personal lives. A lot of times nobody sees it coming until it's a big success.
I agree with that. In hindsight, you can always say that worked.
Yeah.
But there were like so many companies which didn't work as well. Nobody talks about them. And what do you think about the current market situation? Like, you have been through the .com era. You were the CFO of like 3 startups which like exited successfully. So like, what do you think what's happening right now in the market? Is it hype? Is it a bubble? What's your opinion there?
Yeah, I wish I was smart enough to know the answer to that. And I would say that I kind of oscillate between, worried it's a bubble and my investment portfolio is going to go shoop and get, cut in half or worse. I think the NASDAQ decline, peak to trough, I think it was like an 80% decline in the NASDAQ that took 11 or 12 or 13 years. Actually, the same thing happened in Japan. The Nikkei peaked in 1989, and it took roughly 30 years for the Nikkei to regain its peak after its bubble collapsed. So there's part of me that's like, oh man, I'm worried. And then there's part of me that's like, well, the .com bubble happened, but Amazon's still, worth like whatever, $3-4 trillion. Apple's worth like $3-4 trillion. Microsoft's worth like $3-4 trillion. So, it's possible. I think you can have both going on simultaneously. You can have individual companies or specific concepts that are bubble-ish, are in a bubble valuation. But let's just say, hypothetically, some of these AI startups, like Anthropic or OpenAI, let's say they are way overvalued. Is that going to really hurt Apple's stock? Is that going to really hurt? I mean, it won't be good. It won't be a positive development, but, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, these are now like 30, 40, 50-year-old companies. I think Microsoft and Apple were both formed at around the same time, around 1980-ish. So they're now going on into their second half century as businesses, doing the math wrong. They're almost 50 years old. They've been through a lot of market cycles. So I think some of it is if you can ride out market gyrations and you can avoid putting a heavily concentrated bet in your portfolio in one or two companies, maybe there's less to be scared of. Now, having said all that, there's a lot to be scared of because these valuations are pretty crazy.
And like, what do you think about like OpenAI raising money from like one company, investing in another company, and then like the loops that are getting formed, like they're like raising from each other, like spending on each other, like is that normal? Is that okay?
That's a sign of a bubble. That's just flat out bad news. That's off. When I say awful, I don't mean that anybody's doing anything unethical. It's not like anybody broke the law. And for the most part, all of this stuff is out there. These are publicly traded companies, the Microsofts of the world, they're publicly traded. All of this is disclosed. So it's not like it's happening in secret. But it definitely is a worrying sign. This was a big deal. A lot of times when people think of the .com era, they want to draw the parallel to pets.com. Okay. So one online retailer, was ridiculously overvalued and collapsed. As it happens, pet food's a pretty big commodity, and plenty of people sell pet food successfully today. My family shares my Amazon Prime subscription, and my daughter and her family have 3 cats. And every time I look, I mean, they're paying for their stuff themselves, but they're piggybacking on my account. And every time I turn around, there's another order for kitty litter. So it's not like selling pet supplies online was a stupid idea. It's not like, oh, wow, they were just out of their minds. What could they have been thinking? It was a specific business that didn't do well. But where it is scary is in the telecom sector. A lot of the telecom startups of the 90s, which for the most part, nobody even thinks about them anymore. They're like telecom. Whoever in their wildest imagination spends 5 seconds of their day thinking about the failed telecom companies of the 1990s. It's like such ancient history, but that was what they were doing. They were all these basically end of cycle. This was sort of what people used to call POTS, plain old fashioned telephone systems. People were kind of pushing the envelope of a technology that's now very uninteresting and unimportant because everything's migrated to online. But it was sort of the late cycle of the telecom era, and you had all of these telecom gear manufacturers extending financing credit to their customers. And then when somebody pulled the string, the whole sweater unraveled, and it was, there was so many companies that people barely remember, like WorldCom, these businesses that today are like ancient history. So that's the scary part is if you're financing your customers and something goes wrong, that has the potential to have a double whammy. The customers go out of business and your revenues disappear on you. I do think that circular argument is something to definitely be concerned about. Like anything else, it's a matter of scale, right? I mean, vendor financing has been around, since the beginning of capitalism. So it's just a question of how hard do you push to, make your numbers and stretch your business.
My next question is going to be about investment advice. But like me as a common person, what am I supposed to do now? Like, should I invest in the market? Like, what kind of signals can I look for from a company to figure out I can trust this company and put my money in there?
Yeah, I don't believe in picking individual stocks. I think that's hard, unless you're Warren Buffett and there's only one Warren Buffett, or unless you're, a hedge fund manager that it's got a track record that, you can charge a management fee because you've been doing it, year after year. I think the average person, it's very, very challenging to be smarter than the market. So I kind of it's very boring. But, Vanguard, the John Bogle who founded Vanguard, who passed away, a year or two ago, he had a very simple philosophy. It was just put your money into an index fund equities tend to outperform other asset classes over long periods of time. The younger you are, the more market cycles you can ride out. So, if stocks go down, especially if you can invest on a periodic basis, like out of a 401k and it's coming out of your salary. So I guess my investment advice is, for myself at least, I'm not smart enough to know what stocks to pick. So I try to stick to index funds.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's boring. I realize it's very boring advice. But
no, that really makes sense. Like, I hear it, my dad keeps telling me that. But the thing is, like right now, if you look at S&P 500, it's at an all-time high as well.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Again, that's why I'm saying the younger you are, the less it matters. So if you're, let's say you're somebody who's 75 years old and you just got cashed out of something, I don't know, or maybe you inherited some money, you inherited, $500,000. Maybe you don't want to put everything into the equity markets. If, all of the analysis suggests that the next 10 years should be a decade of underperformance, because typically when the market gets way overvalued, it takes, historical data shows that it can often take as long as 10 years. Again, I referenced the NASDAQ going from peak to trough, decline of like 80%. And it took, over 10 years for that to get recovered. So the older you are, the less, runway you have to ride that out. But I would say, if you're young enough, sort of who cares? Just, so the market's going to go down. As long as you don't need the money immediately. Like if you're saving up for a down payment for a house or, something like that, obviously you want to have that money less at risk. I remember one of the startups that I was part of, I was lucky and I did okay. I mean, it wasn't, not enough money to retire on, but enough money to make a difference. And we were in the process of buying a house, and my wife said, I want you to sell half of it now. Like, I want to know that we can buy the house without having to worry about the market.
Any other advice, Ed, that you have for the audience? Anything with money, anything with investment, anything with AI?
I think it's fun to learn new stuff. Just personally, I like new ideas, new concepts. So I think the fact that business seems like business is moving faster. I don't know if that's just the headlines. Maybe the headlines just move faster, but it seems like business is moving faster. So I think it's kind of a fun era to be living in. So I don't know that I have specific advice. I do think we tend to get used to technology pretty quickly. So like if you could have gone back in time and predicted, let's say, for example, smartphones, you would have said like, oh my God, that's like the most amazing thing in the world. And now people are like, oh, I'm sick and tired of smartphones. Everybody's on their phone and it's doom scrolling, or it's, what's the term? It's brain rot. It's spending too much time on, on sites that are causing my brain to atrophy. So it's funny how it's possible that AI may be, whizzier and more, technologically advanced than anything we've ever seen. It's also possible, just given the human condition, we may get used to it and say, what have you done for me lately? It's like, okay, so now a factory can make a car with, with fewer, labor inputs and more, capital inputs. Oh, well, okay, what's next? Yawn. So I think that's probably, I would say I don't know that I call that advice, but people seem to have a very good propensity to get used to whatever the current situation is and then say, well, why isn't it getting better? Why is it stagnating? A lot of people now are like, well, the internet is like awful. Like people are now a lot of people are like soured on the whole online experience. But, 20 years ago it was like, oh my God, you mean this might actually happen? And now it's happened, and people aren't necessarily any happier because of it.
Agreed. Humans have a tendency to adapt very quickly to changes. I'm so used to getting internet on the plane now.
Yeah.
I hate it when the plane doesn't have Wi-Fi.
Right.
So yeah, agreed. Is there a way people can connect with you, Ed?
Sure. So my company is called Harris Northwest Advisors. My website is harrisnwa.com. And my email is ed@harrisnwa.com. I'll say that again. I kind of stumbled. ed@harrisnwa.com. And again, we do two things. We help privately held businesses when they want to get acquired. Something I've got, decades of experience at, and, many, many transactions I've been a part of. And then we also have a free platform for startups and investors called Harris Alpha. And if you're an accredited investor that wants to see deals, or if you're a startup that's looking to raise money, we'd love to help you out on that platform.
Great. I'll add it to the description as well. Yeah, thank you so much, Ed, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Apurva, for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
No worries. This was incredible. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.